Hello? Okay. Hello, I'm Dr. Maxine Thompson, and I will be teaching your class how to write a best-selling novel. And we're going to use our slide presentations. We need stories more than ever today because of COVID. We're talking about suffering, struggling, and overcoming. The qualities of a best-selling novel. Number one, it will build word-of-mouth traction. We can take the example of the Black Panther movie. Almost everyone talked about it, and even the white movie goers and the movie makers were shocked when it made billions of dollars internationally. But it was because of word-of-mouth traction. It wasn't because they did a lot of advertising. Number two, a best-selling novel is generally easily translatable into a film or a play. And you can take the cartoons that Black Panther movie was made from. But most of the books, from Little Woman to there's just so many books. Beloved, they were taken from good books. Some of the best movies came from books. Now, one of the things you need in a best-selling novel is good characterization and provocative plot. Even in autobiographies, there should be a character arc, such as Malcolm X. He went from being a thug to being a great spokesman, and he also became a leader, a politician. Although he was very hated when he was alive, he is well quoted now, and people recognize how he was ahead of his time. We have Booker T. Washington's book, Up from Slavery. He also became a great man. And you saw how he went from slavery to being able to work in the White House. Number four, a best-selling novel will have a story that resonates with readers. The readers will love it. They will relate to it. They can't put the book down. Sometimes they're up all night reading the book. So you definitely want to have a book that has your readers where they're just enthralled and they can't put it down. And number five is a story that gains buzz. This is one that you'll see people talking about the book on Facebook. They'll be on social media talking about the book. It will be in the news. Sometime it'll be on TV. We used to have a lot of book signings. Now we don't have as many book signings, so things have changed. But because of that, you'll see more of the book online, and it can still sell that way. We still have a lot of New York Times bestselling authors. And one of the things that I did as an editor and as a literary agent was help a lot of writers to get their books to best-selling status. I've had books that went to New York Times bestsellers and also to Essence bestsellers when they had the Essence bestsellers list. Okay. And another thing that's a quality of a best-selling novel is it's a story that is unpredictable. You shouldn't be able to say, oh, I know they're going to get together at the end. You shouldn't make the plot where the reader can tell what's going to happen. Make them have to guess. Just kind of fake them out. Fake the reader out. Do not give away your story. Because some of the best movies that we've ever seen or books are books that we don't know. Hold on one second. Hold on 1 second. Hey, excuse me. You want a story that is a page turner, one that you can't put down, a book that is one that the reader loves. And you want a story that has tension, suspense, and dramatic conflict. A story that has a strong theme about the human condition. Those are stories that you love to read, such as Beloved. It always made me wonder, How would a slave woman such as Setha kill her child and still be able to live with it? But she chose to kill her child rather than see her be sent back to slavery. And then we also want a story that has strong reader engagement and emotional impact. Once again, I'm going back to Toni Morrison's Beloved, and even her first book, The Bluest Eye, where she talked about a little black girl that wanted to have blue eyes. Her blue eyes were just a figment of her imagination, but that's also part of what goes on here in America, where our young people are believed not to think they're beautiful. Check. Just 1 minute. Okay, qualities of characters in a best-selling novel. Lead characters are good at what they do. Katniss in the Hunger Games was really good with the arrow, and that's how she was able to escape, because they were going to be killed. Only the people who survived, the other teams, were able to escape. And then we had Z in LA Blues. Z is my character in my book, LA Blues, if you can see it over here. Z was raised in South Central. Her mother was a gangbanger, and I was a former social worker. I wanted to see what was it like to have a child that I had worked with, to see what her life was. Well, she ends up becoming a police officer who gets fired for drinking, and then she becomes a then after she becomes a police officer, she becomes a private detective. And we can't see which way the story is going until you get into it. But many of the readers have said they love Z, and it's been a big seller on Goodreads. Okay, number 2, another quality of a best-selling novel character is lead characters are feisty, they're eccentric, and they're different. Just think of some of the books that you love the best. You don't always like the Pollyanna good characters. You want the characters that really show out. Just one moment. And lead characters are proactive. If you look at most detective stories, they're stories where the detective takes the lead and looks for the killer. They don't sit back waiting for the leads to come to them. They go look for the leads. And the same with lead character. They are agents of change. They're not victims. They're not like a domestic violence victim. They are generally people who go out and make things happen. And if the character starts out being a victim and being beaten, she will change and take control of her life and become proactive. Lead characters go through a character arc. Lead characters go through a character arc. And as they go through a character arc, they will definitely be people who say, hey, I'm not going to be who I was. I had a bad attitude when I started this story, but I'm going to change. Some of your best stories are people that have changed. You think about it. I always liked in To Kill a Mockingbird, how Scout went from being a little tomboy, and her main goal was to try to get Boo to come out of his house. But then at the end, Boo, she found out, was a neighbor. He wasn't just an eccentric old man, and he saved Jim and Scout's life. So that's the other thing. You always look for how your character changed. At first, Scout was just a tomboy, and she always acted wild and crazy. But at the end, she became a different person. I'm sure she was not the same person, even though the story only covers a year that she's 6 and 7. Okay, lead characters are relatable. We like characters who are mothers, sisters, brothers, wives, husbands, people that we say, hey, I can relate to that. I'm married, or I'm a sister, or I'm a friend. So we like characters who are like that. Now, lead characters are flawed, but tend to have courage or get courage. If they're afraid, they will get some courage. Lead characters are the people that you follow, and even if they're antagonists and they're bad, you you find yourself really liking some of the worst characters become some of the most interesting characters. So they don't have to be perfect. Okay. Now, all of your characters are going to learn a lesson that leads to your theme. One of the themes can be forgiveness. They can learn from, if they were the victim of child abuse, then they might have to learn to forgive their parents. Love, and this might include self-love. If they love someone else more than they love themselves, then that is not a good thing. And then faith. They have to have faith in oneself, in others, in the world, and in God. Fear, overcoming whatever their problem or their obstacle is, they have to find it. And they have to find it through finding courage. Trust. The theme might be trust in oneself, in others, or in the unknown, especially in science fiction. Survival, including the will to live. Sorry. Selflessness, including sacrifice, altruism, heroism, and overcoming greed. Responsibility, including duty, standing up for a cause, which we see a lot of that going on since the George Floyd, since he was shot. I mean, since he was killed. There's been so many shot, I'm getting them mixed up. But we're seeing a lot of people standing up and saying, no, this is wrong. Racism is wrong. And they're saying, no, we're not going to do this no more. Okay. And redemption, including atonement, accepting blame, remorse, and salvation. These are things that we see in a lot of stories where the person accepts, hey, I was an alcoholic. I was the one who ran over the child. There are just a lot of good books, and you need to look for stories with redemption. They really tend to have a lot more pack to them, a punch to them, than stories that don't have redemption. Okay, genres. There are a lot of genres, mystery, suspense, but rites of passage, that's the main one. Often coming of age novels. Those are the most popular novels now. You have a lot of young adult novels that adults are watching, and that adults are looking at the movies, reading the books. They made a lot of movies out of these young adult novels. One of them, the rites of passage, is a life problem, a universal challenge that often results from nothing more than just being alive, such as puberty, adolescence, midlife, separation, death, and so on. If your parents get a divorce when you're a teenager, that has a big impact on you. Okay, a wrong way to attack the problem. Your hero can't face this challenge head on, or at least not at first. There needs to be some level of avoidance happening, usually as an attempt to evade the pain. And acceptance of the hard truth. This is the real solution, and it usually comes with the understanding that it's the hero who must change, not life itself. And then these are steps for building a novel. Number 1, start with your idea as part of your preparation phase. 2, know your original idea for your book in one sentence. Example, what if a person witnesses a murder, then finds out the government is behind it, so that he has to run for his life? I've seen a lot of movies like that. And one of them was The Fugitive. Okay, 3, write out a calendar for a year. Write out your objectives. Plan 12 months in advance. 4, the events of the plot should be interlinked. Use subplots to mirror your main plot. Titles. The title of your book should have ADA, which is attract the reader's attention, arouse interest, create a demand for the product, prompt the reader to action, and this will help in fiction as well as nonfiction. Formula for fiction. An appealing character strives against the odds for a worthwhile goal. There are exceptions. Frederick Forsyth's novel, The Day of the Jackal. In that book, The main character was trying to kill the president of France. Okay, things every scene must have. When writing fiction, there's a lot of advice out there in books and on the internet. One of the most important pieces of advice you can take on board is understanding that. Get out here. I'm on the camera. Get out. One of the most important pieces of advice you can take on board is understanding that story is made up of 4 elements. And those 4 elements are character, who is the story about, goal, what does that character want, conflict, what gets in their way to stop them, and resolution, how do they overcome the obstacles. And scenes, stories are made of scenes. Scenes include characters. You get your main characters, and that would be your protagonist, your antagonist, maybe your romantic interest, and your buddy. And that would be the person that's going to be the friend to the main character. Then action. What action is it going to take? Now, most people like books that have really good characters. They want action, but they also want characters that are involving and engaging. Setting. Try to have an interesting setting. It doesn't have to be exotic, but maybe something that people don't know about. Maybe a wine building country, back country in the wines, or someplace down in New Orleans. But do not have a setting that's boring. There's setups. You set up in a scene, such as you set it up by letting us know that this character is going to get killed or he's going to witness a murder. And then you pay it off by showing who solves the case, do they get caught, and does the main character live? That's another thing. Okay, protagonist writing exercise. How would you describe your protagonist as you do some writing exercises? What is her defining quality? What is the opposite of that quality? What would mentally destroy your character? How does your character feel about his mother and father? And when did your character feel completely loved and accepted? All this is important. How a character feels about his family or origin plays a lot. And people have gotten away from writing stories about orphans, such as Oliver Twist. People don't like books like that. They want to know that the person has a family. Even if it's a foster family, family of friends, but it does not, they don't like people that just seem like they just dropped in the world alone like Adam. Okay. Protagonist writing exercises continued. What would have to happen to make your character speak out or defend a stranger in public? And that's kind of what we're seeing with all the riots we've had. A lot of times, the people who've come out to protest, they do not know the people that have been, shot by the police or had the knee on their neck. They didn't know George, or they didn't know Atlanta protested, and now everyone's protesting over the goodness. Everyone's protesting over all these killings that the police are not being charged with. What will your character lie about? Will he lie about his age, his money status, if he committed a crime? Does your character need friends? What physical thing does your character fear most? If your character could choose to spend his last day alive with one person, dead or alive, who would he choose? And what is his defining strength? Is he able to work for someone else? Does your character have a positive or negative body image? And that, is he able to work for someone else? Is your character an entrepreneur? That's another thing you can check out. Who or what would your character die for? Does your character have a plan for tomorrow, next week, next year? Is your character resilient enough to change? What would your character think if he could see you now? Inciting incidents and conflicts. Is there something that is compelling your character to act like an inciting incident? That would be the thing that would make your character stop being who he is and say, "Oh, I've got to get involved." An inciting incident is an event that forces your character to act, compelling them to stop sitting around and do something. And that could be what happened when we saw so many go out and do all these protests this summer. Because a lot of people said they didn't know it was any such thing as racism until they saw all these things that are happening right here on phones now. People are taking pictures of all the racism and all the police brutality with their phones. And so a lot of people said they didn't know. So is there conflict in the middle of your story? A story with no conflict is like a cake with no baking powder. The cake won't rise. The story will be flat. So you want to make sure you keep conflict all through your story, even to the end. Does the ending resolve the conflict? Readers expect the story resolution. If Aunt Mary has been taken captive by a herd of cats in the middle of the story, that's just an example, readers will want to know what happened to Aunt Mary by the end of the story. So never leave your story without a resolution. Okay, write in the margin what each paragraph does. While you're typing out your pages, take them out and handwrite in the margin what each paragraph does and what is the purpose of it. I just told you to revise for story structure. How do I do that, you ask? Here's the first step. Write in the margin what each paragraph does. Take out the paragraphs that don't move the story forward or combine the paragraphs that are similar. Sometimes you can combine characters as well. Sean Cohn suggests you write down your list of scenes, the word count for each scene, and a short sentence to summarize what happens in each scene. When you look at the word count for each scene, you will see if your scenes have equal weight. The industry standard is for the beginning hook to be 25% of the story, the middle build to be about 50%, and the ending payoff to be about 25% of the story. And take out the boring parts. Read your story out loud. Setup. And that's the setup where the person has the problem. Then the reaction is at first they're making a lot of mistakes in their reaction. And they're running, they're doing everything but facing the problem. Then they turn around and face the problem, become proactive. And then there's a resolution. So but make sure you read the story out loud. Qualities of exceptional stories. Most exceptional stories are a collection of great scenes that flow smoothly from one to another. Scene by scene editing is a process that evaluates key story elements for each scene. To help you create great scenes that all link together, this course will take you through 17 elements. And we're going to just talk about those, and then we'll be ending up. And I'll be in my booth if you have any questions. But the first one is point of view character. Who is your point of view character? The point of view character goal. You might have more than one point of view character, but let's just focus on one. What is the goal of the point of view character? The purpose of a scene. Scene opening type. Scene entry hook. Scene closing type. Scene exit hook. Location. Where's the story located? Tension. Make sure you have tension on every page. Almost have a death on each page, even if it's a death of the person's professional life, death of their what people think of them. But it doesn't have to be a physical death. It could be a psychological death. They could lose their job. Okay, 10, conflict. Make sure there's conflict. That means there are two opposing elements that are fighting each other. 11, flashbacks. Sometimes you use flashbacks, but don't use them too much. Use them where they don't stop the story. 12, backstory. Your backstory kind of ease that in near the back of the story and just in bits and pieces, then the reader can put it together. The weather. Sometimes when you have a storm during a story, that is a good way to keep the tension. And census, time, date, and story arc. Okay, I'm gonna close out, and you can contact me at one of the networking events or at my booth. Thank you very much, Dr. Maxine Thompson.